This is Pat Matthews of Pat Matthews Productions, and I want to welcome you to Beatles-A-Rama TV, your favorite interviews and video all in one place, right here on Beatles-A-Rama TV. Beatles-A-Rama TV is on the air.
So, with me today for Beatles-A-Rama Radio and TV is the one and only Alan G. Parker, and he is a filmmaker, a rock and roll chronicler, a detective digging for clues, and so much more. The man is music, the man is film, and before we went on the air, we were just extensively talking about Kiss, because with the passing of Ace Frehley, we're both fans and we've both been to some shows and just talking about good times. Yeah
Definitely. Yeah.
So Alan, where we left off, your movie,
Yes.
Borrowed Time.
Yeah.
This is a movie. Can you tell the listeners what is Borrowed Time in your own words?
Borrowed Time originally, if you go way back to the start gate, was perceived as something that it absolutely never became. And that, to be honest with you, in many ways is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
We had initially sat down and talked about the possibility of doing a film whereby we would find out, whilst telling this, technically still telling the story of John's last decade, but we'd find out a little bit more about whether or not there is any reality in all these books that have been written about the fact that the killer was trained by the CIA or the FBI or God knows who else, and was he?
All the conspiracies.
We talked to a few people who did seem to have some good leads on that, to be fair to them.
Really?
There did seem to be some meat on the bone. Then the whole thing took a turn because the plan had been to start shooting at the beginning of 2020. Or before 2020, this thing called COVID arrived and kind of spoiled
everything.
And so during that time period, what it did was two things. Number one, we were made aware that Sky Television were already going down that particular rabbit hole. Was it Sky? Was it Apple Plus? Anyway, one of those channels was doing.
Yeah.
And they were doing something, from what we could gather, quite in depth. And it would blow according to what I'd read in the press release, would blow the manhole cover off whether or not it was a setup or what it was, right?
Right.
So by that stage, we'd done quite a fair amount of work. We certainly knew that we were going to have at least 40 interviewees. We ended up having 60 odd, but we knew we had 40 at that point.
Right.
We also knew that, with the exception of two or three journalists, who I always like to get some really good high-class journalists on, purely because you can be anybody's best friend. You can hang out with them till the cows come home. But it's highly likely you're going to remember what colour socks they were wearing or exactly what day. I've had good pals who've said to me, yeah, it was in January that year. And then you go, well, it couldn't have been because that artist was on tour all January. Oh, no, you're right. It was September. There's a bit of a difference. There's no goalpost there. So
it's good to get confirmation of details so everything fits and makes sense. I get that.
The plan then, we thought, okay, well, what if we looked at it kind of almost in, if it's a pizza, let's say it's a pizza that's only been sliced into three. Part one will be the background, kind of who is John Lennon, where's he from, what's his back, how did this kid become a Beatle? Then the Beatles split, and then we go off. Part two is kind of Yoko into going to America, initially working with all the peaceniks and the various things with Jerry Rubin and so on. And then at the end, of course, the December 7th, 8th, 9th, what happened? How does it break round the world? See if we can find anything during that entire journey that's brand new. We knew at the beginning, we'd been told a couple of stories by insiders where we go, well, I've read every book on Lennon ever, And I'm already, before we'd rolled cameras, I'm hearing stories down telephones where I'm going, ooh, that's interesting. The biggie, which I think I mentioned to you briefly last time, is that while we were all locked down on what I now refer to as COVID watch, I got a call. Initially, I'd been talking to this guy for about a year or so on Facebook, private message.
Okay.
We'd been having a very, very interesting conversation. This guy was by the name of Mark, who used to work for a company called Britannia Row. And I don't know if his boss, was certainly someone he worked with, had been one of the great set designers. Indeed, he designed the stage set for Pink Floyd The Wall in 1980.
Oh,
they built the wall and then knocked it all back down again. In out with people, done stage sets for people like Stevie Wonder, Tina Turner, which is Mark's boss.
Mm-hmm.
He had been out to New York, totally unknown to anybody, no big press stories about it that you can find, in October of 80, and he'd sat down with John and Yoko at the Dakota for a couple of days, and they had planned a stage design for a 12-month-long world tour that would take place in 1981. Now, at the time that this particular piece of information was given to me, if you Googled it, you couldn't get much more than about 3 paragraphs. So I said to him, look, this is a great story. I said, but I know we got given a huge revelation when we did the Sgt. Pepper film. And as much as I trusted implicitly the guy who gave me the information, the first thing the legals said was, someone's going to have to stand this story up. There's going to be another person who knows this story was real.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise you may run into problems legally. So,
Right.
he said, no. He said, this is the good news. He said, not only am I telling you this story is completely true, he said, but I was going to be the guy who would write the press release to break this story.
Oh, wow.
And the diagrams, the original rough sketches that this guy who's now no longer with us, who died from cancer, who'd been there in October 80 with John and Yoko, all the sketches still exist.
Mm.
So although they were never used, although the stages it never saw the light of day. Then he goes into this detail, which I thought was amazing when you think, I remember going to see Paul McCartney multiple times in 89 and 90 when he made his comeback tour.
Right.
If you think about it, it's a brilliant show, but the stage set was still quite basic. It was a video screen before they came on. It was a few little things flickering in the background while he was on, maybe the odd explosion here and there for Live and Let Die, and then all done, right?
Right.
Show that Lennon was talking about taking out almost a decade earlier in 1981 was, or certainly from the sketches I was then later shown in the Sanctum Hotel here in London, looked like it had been beamed down from the planet Zog. There were screens within the edges of the stage into the audience on cantilever arms.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone did that till either Metallica or U2 about 2 decades later, not one decade. There was stuff right across the back. So I don't remember seeing a concert in 81 where it wasn't a cloth backdrop, more than likely printed, right?
Yeah.
This is a screen from one side to the other, like U2 use at Madison Square Garden.
Right. Like the norm nowadays.
So yeah, now these modern day it would be the norm. And I said, wow, this is going to be that what we decided to do, we knew we'd got something. We knew we had a big story.
Yeah.
The next move is we can't just put this guy Mark on screen to talk about it and then a journalist, because it's still going to look like there's nothing from inside.
Right.
But we knew we could get Earl Slick in the movie, who not only 2 albums but was going to be the guitar player on the tour.
Right.
We also knew that we could get hold of a guy that was the engineer on Double Fantasy, and he'd been out to be the front of house sound guy tour. Then this guy Mark, who got me the sketches, who got me the in, if you like, to knowing what John's 1981 tour would look like aesthetically, then says, "Oh, but you'll be talking to Henry the Horse, won't you?" And I go, "Who's Henry the Horse?" He said, "Henry the Horse Smith." And Henry the Horse Smith was going to be the tour manager. He ended up working with Aerosmith. He'd worked with Led Zeppelin. They're the people who named him the Horse. And Lennon had rung him and said, would you like to come and be involved in this tour and do the tour for me? Because, you come out of recommended. So again, we got Henry through Mark. So now, not only do we have a pretty much untold John Lennon story in this kind of detail, but we've got Andy Peebles, of course, who talked about the
Of course, yeah.
dinner. So we've got 6 people to talk about it, which is way better than one.
Exactly, yeah.
And so we started piecing it together, and the idea was that it would go initially that it would go at the very end. But the more times that the movie was screened, either for team members or for cast members or for investors, people saw the film. And as you know yourself, the film within it has got probably 20 or 30 little tiny stories where we're not exactly reinventing the wheel, but we're kind of saying, you thought this is what happened, but this is what really happened.
Oh,
Is
okay.
from the horse's mouth, right?
Right.
With this story, which was huge, every time anybody saw it on a test screening, they looked at me and went, don't want to tell you your job, but shouldn't you be opening with that? That's the biggest. That is the bit that almost, if that came in straight after the opening credits, you would literally grab your audience,
Yeah.
and then you could drag them anywhere you wanted with them
You have them by the collar, yeah.
for however long you wanted to drag them there, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
So we went in the studio again, and we did a few cuts. We slimmed it down a little bit, the movie, and we then put this big story right after the opening credits. Before we even go back in time, before we go back to John's birth and the separation of his parents and being raised by his auntie, any of that stuff, we start with the 81 tour. Because, I've done quite a few Q&As in the UK, and I sat right at the back of the cinema to watch the film with the audience. And as soon as the opening credits end, and as soon as as soon as you get straight into that story, the number of gasps you hear in the audience, it's like you've gone to a football match or something.
Yeah.
It's a real live experience. It's almost like they don't know what they're seeing. Our animation team, which is headed up by an incredible animator by the name of Dan Solis, built this stage for us. So we had the sketches. We gave the sketches to the animation team and said, "Okay, build me this. Let's let the audience see exactly what we're talking about."
Yeah.
1981 standards. This, as I said, this isn't a standard stage set. This has been
It's unheard of.
beamed down from Zog, basically. And again, another thing that people weren't doing in 1981 that everybody involved with the tour told us, because John and Yoko didn't want to end up exhausted going to the world in a year, they made a decision to do something which, in the modern age, people like Paul do now, Bruce Springsteen does now, U2, Metallica, all the big boys.
Yeah.
But the plan was roll into a town, do 5 nights, move on. Roll into a town, do 4 nights, move on. So somewhere is home for a time. And I'd never heard of that in 90. I don't even think that was in 90.
Yeah.
We came in, did a mini residency almost, and then disappeared and went somewhere else. And the way it was explained to me, I think Henry that actually said, he said, John's theory was, if we come to, say, England and we do London and Liverpool and Glasgow, well, that's, for a start, ours is not a fantastically huge island. We're doing top bottom. So if we're there for 5 or 6 nights, people can travel in.
Yeah. That makes good sense.
Which they're going to want to do. They're going to travel in and see John Lennon,
Yeah, John Lennon, I'm there.
Yeah,
right.
So it was, in a way, what we came out with. The borrowed time that's now on cinema screens and on DVD and Blu-ray isn't remotely what we first talked about way back in, 2018, 2019. It's a long way from it, but I think it's probably a lot better for it because it's grown and it's kind of gestated over time with all of us, with the team, with the interviewees, with with the edit squad, animation, everybody has lived it for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's come out the other end of something. I mean, for example, we've never done a movie, God, for I don't know how many years back, where we don't do a lot of extras for the DVD and Blu-ray, which we film while we're going around.
Yeah, yeah.
And we did film a few things for extras, but the original cut that I did for Borrowed Time was almost 4 hours long.
Oh, wow.
Because the plan had been, take it out, shop it around, and see if anybody fancies it being a 3 or 4 part TV series.
Okay.
If they do, pop it back. I've already made kind of some little marks where I know the cuts will be, and we'll just go 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, slice it, dice it, and send it back again. When it went out for sale, the original sales team came back to our sales manager, Alan Partington, and said, you know, Alan's quite well known for cinema stuff. He's quite well known for the sort of 2 hour or just over 2 hour story. Why are you kind of underselling yourself by trying to make this a TV event? Why not a big screen event? So I went back in with the editor and we recut it. We cut it down to just over 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
Now, before we recut it, I made some notes myself. That the Christmas prior to that, which unfortunately was the last Christmas he was with us, I was able to show the film at the studio to Tony Bramwell.
Oh,
and we sat and watched it. And we watched it in its entirety, so 3 hours and 31 minutes, whatever it was at the time, right?
Yeah.
And when it ended, Tony, who I've known since I was about 18, 19, from Liverpool Beatles,
Right.
looked at me and said, oh, I thought you were going to make a film about my mate. And, oh my God, he doesn't like it. This is horrible. And he looked, he put his arms, he gave me a hook, and he said, you didn't make a film about my mate. You made the film about my mate. I was kind of like, wow, he absolutely loves it. He said, look, I know it's unofficial, so you've not got this and this, but you've managed to get a lot of his mates on screen, and they've all been really, really honest.
Yeah.
They haven't, shirked round things or potentially ignored certain subjects that, like maybe they have done in the past in previous documentaries. They've just gone straight on. This is the John I remember.
Right.
So I said, unfortunately, I said, that version you've just watched, we're probably going to dump it at the end of the week because we're doing a shorter version. And Tony said, you can't dump it. He said, you're going to do a DVD and a Blu-ray, aren't you? We are. Well, you put that on. That's your extras. If people love the movie, why would they not want to see the film? And as it turns out, the way we've ended up cutting it, although it's in a different order in some places as well, and also we've done different bits of animation or different segue bits of archive. If you buy the Blu-ray and you then therefore own the two, one of them is the standard cut and one that we're calling the director's cut. But if you see the two of them, there's now a 98-minute difference. Well, 98 minutes is a movie on its own.
Yeah.
So, you get situations whereby the real hardcore fans, who obviously are in contact with me quite a lot since the on social media, I've heard from a lot of them since this film came out in the UK and in Europe, and it's like so I got the Blu-ray and I watched the cinema cut night one, and 3 or 4 nights later, when it got to weekend, I sat down again and watched the director's cut. And I go, right, and they go, well, we thought you made a good film when we saw the cinema cut. But when we saw the director's cut, we were just sat with our mouths wide open. So many little things in there.
Yeah.
As I say, they're not, none of them are going to, with the exception of the 81 tour, where there's no sort of big other groundbreaking story, but there are that when you put them on paper and you or on screen, should I say, and sit down and listen to them, you go, actually, this person's right. We have known this story for years, but not like this.
Yeah.
I mean, a good example, the best one I can think of is the May Pang story. So John and May.
Oh, May Pang, yeah.
For God knows how many years we've all been told the story that Yoko Ono set up that affair.
Mm-hmm.
I had it from an incredibly good source on screen that Yoko didn't set up that affair. What happened was, as again we all know, John was already playing around. He'd had the dalliance at Bob Gruen's party. There'd been other things that had been reported over
Right.
the. Yoko went to Chicago to do a female peace protest on her own.
Mm-hmm.
Back was turned. John packed 2 suitcases and booked 2 tickets and went to LA with May Pank.
Ah.
Now, what you tend to see, and a few people have talked about this in the film, is that when John went back to Yoko in 75,
Right.
there does tend to be a certain amount of revisionism of the last 2 or 3 years, right? So,
Right.
we had it recently with one of the reissues. On the original vinyl Mind Games, May is credited as either his assistant or a producer or whatever.
Right.
When in reissue by Leno Music, May doesn't even get a name check on the album. It's whatever the credit was replaced by the word Yoko Ono, right?
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, a bit like some of the people that are in the movie, as they say on screen. So I'm saying nothing they haven't already said. I'm just a bit. I don't like that.
Yeah.
Ray Conley, the great Ray Conley on screen actually says, I didn't understand why I could, okay, I see why he went back, but I don't see why he sort of told the line for the last 5 years, oh, this is how this happened, isn't it, John? Yeah, that's exactly how that happened, mother. And it's kind of like, we know it didn't happen that way. It was kind of,
It was all spin.
Yeah, it was all spin. It was good PR.
Just like he said, I didn't pick up a guitar in 5 years. Well, no, you
yeah.
did.
Yeah. Do you know what's funny? I remember saying this when we were working on the film with the team. I said, it's really funny. I said, there's about a shelf and a half of bootlegs in here somewhere over there that prove positively that he picked
Otherwise,
up 5 years,
Yes.
If all he did was play about with something that ended up becoming an entirely different song 3 years later.
Right. Yeah.
Like told me with their 77, there might not have been, nobody told me at that point in time, but they were certainly heading on the way there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There's things necessarily maybe aren't always said,
There's so many stories, especially around the whole May Pang thing. You could make a movie just about that, really. But, what always fascinated me when we're talking about spin and all the Playboy interviews and all the, Andy Peebles interviews for the BBC and RKO out of LA, they had this story that they spun, and that was going to be the official story, but it didn't match up with what some of us already knew, and the insiders already knew too. So I was under the impression that once he went back to Yoko, him and May were basically done. However, if you talk to some of the insiders like Bob Gruen, who I'm going to be interviewing him as well, I remember at a Beatlefest, back when they called it Beatlefest in Chicago, Bob Gruen gave a real emotional, heartfelt thing. But getting to the point, he had brought up that even in 1980, John and May were still kind of seeing each other on the side.
I had lunch with May in New York in 2014, pre-Pepper movie.
Right.
And I said, look, one day, I knew it was going to be way in the future, but one day we'll probably do a film about John. Are you interested? And she said, yes. Now, I understand, there's a big gap between 2014 and 2021 when we started shooting.
Yeah.
So when we went to get an interview with her, we were told in no uncertain terms by a producer that was working with her, oh, she's doing a film. And I thought, well, I guess good on her, she's not in R1, but she's going to do one. And I really, really thought, given what got said, even at that lunch, I thought, we're now going to get the truth. We're going to get everything that everyone's been talking about or dancing around for the last 25, 30, 40 years.
Right.
No, we got the movie, I don't dislike the movie that got made.
No, I've seen it.
But it
was a pleasant surprise.
But it still sticks in many ways.
Yeah.
Like clue to this. Oh, Yoko set up the affair. No, I said, John, I think certainly going off what people said, and obviously when you interview 60 people, you can't put every word said on.
Right.
Otherwise, it would be like the darn thing would last for months. We put it down in the studio before we started cutting at the interviews. We had about 80 hours of talking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that come down to 2 hours ultimately. But if you take what was said that either exists on screen or exists in a box somewhere on hard drive still,
Mm-hmm.
I think if John had not been killed, then somewhere around either 81 or 82, he'd have gone back to me and they'd have got a flat together.
I can see that.
I believe that, because I don't think they were getting on. Again, a lot of these things didn't come out till later, but it's easy now, especially with what happened,
Mm-hmm.
to Double Fantasy was a fantastic album and every John Lennon fan bought it and they all thought it was the second coming. It was amazing. Not really. I was 15 years old. I was absolutely anticipating it like the second coming. I believed. For a start, I'd got into the Beatles when I was 9. John as a solo artist a little later, although he was my favourite Beatle.
Right.
I was very excited about the fact that there was now going to be a John Lennon album that I could buy on release day, because the other ones I owned, I'd bought,
right,
after the fact. And I was getting very, very excited. I was seeing news in the UK music press. I was hearing things on the radio. I remember hearing Just Like Starting Over on the radio before I owned the single, probably about a week or so before.
Right.
But when I went to buy the album, like a huge amount, certainly I can say, of UK Lennon fans,
Right.
this is my hero. He's been away, missing in action for 5 years as a recording artist. When I find out there's 10 songs on the little bus ride on the way back to Mum and Dad's to go and play it, I'm at least expecting them to be 10 John Lennon songs.
Right.
But I already own Starting Over, and I noticed that one of the songs listed on the back of the album sleeve is the B-side of Starting Over, which is a Yoko Ono song. And I go, oh, well, maybe, even, me being me, I'm still expecting 9 John Lennon songs when I get home.
Right, yeah.
When I get home and find 5, I felt quite cheated, really. I mean, I didn't dislike the 5. I don't think there's anything of hers, with the possible exception of Sister Oh Sister, that I've ever heard that I've actually listened to all the way through more than once.
Right.
I kind of get a bit irritated by it. It's like I didn't pay for that bit over there. What's quite, I think it was my brother was the first person to do this a few years ago, is circulate a CDR among a few of the boys, which is John's Milk and Honey tracks and John's Double Fantasy tracks as a 10-song CD.
Okay, yeah.
Forget the rest. That's, and lest we forget, Charles Shaw Murray in the UK absolutely destroyed the album. The review he gave it didn't even leave it anywhere to die. He just left it wounded and limping, basically. He left back, his teeth are no longer sharp. He's talking about being a house husband. These are nearly all love songs. It's pathetic. He's only recorded 5 songs in 5 years, and he just ripped it to pieces.
Right.
Admittedly, it's coming out on the aftermath of punk here and the birth of New Romantic. So, again, to use an old Billy Connolly line, it's about as hip as a 3-foot-long pink sausage bag, right? It's like there's nothing great about it as far as you're concerned.
Yeah.
And then, when we're later on doing the interviews with Andy Peebles and Dave Sholin and Dave's boss, Jerry Cagle, who we got on screen, never done an interview in 40-odd years and knew John 7 years, right?
Right.
Nobody even wanted to do press and PR on it. David Geffen had to ring Andy Peebles and practically, please, can you come and do something? We're trying to get this album stiffing all over the world. We need to get a big interview done.
Right.
When Dave Sholin's station got the call, can you come and interview John Lennon? Of course, Dave's a fan. He says I'd have walked to New York, to do it. But the station didn't want to pay for the interview. The station were like, John Lennon is yesterday's chip rappers. He's done. So Jerry Cagle, Dave's boss, lovely, lovely man. We did a great interview with him, a lot of which is in the... And Jerry paid for the interview out of his back pocket. He says, now, obviously, given what happened in the next 24 hours, it was the best money anybody in entertainment ever spent, right?
Right.
Because it was syndicated around the world. It was just done for one radio station in America.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like people almost had to... I mean, Ray Conley was supposed to be doing a newspaper interview with John and Yoko.
Mm-hmm.
3 times he rang, and 3 times she said, no, not yet. No, not yet. Ray's plane ticket was for Ray to fly out from the UK on the evening our time of December 8th.
Mm.
So Ray wouldn't have got there till December 9th.
Right.
He'd rung the day before and they'd said, oh, John and Yoko will be at the studio. They're finishing a song of hers off. He said, well, I wasn't particularly interested in going to that session. So I said, right, what do I do? They said, oh, pop by and we'll give you a time to come and see him the following day. He was led in bed asleep and the phone rang and he presumed it was his car to take him to the airport because it was an early flight.
Right.
He said to his wife, it must be the car, leaned over to get the phone and then realised just how dark it was and went a bit early for the car.
Mm-hmm.
And it was news editor. Hi, Ray, got so I need you to get moving on a job. Oh, what's that? Number 1, John Lennon's been killed. Number 2, you're flying nowhere. Number 3, I need an obituary by 9 a.m.
Oh my goodness.
So that's Ray. That's Ray's day, right?
Yeah. What an awful way to start a day.
Horrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Alan, do you think Lennon's message of peace would have survived, maybe even translate in today's social media age of outrage?
Do you know what? It's funny. It's funny. A few people have said this. If you look at what John was all about, and then if you take into account the fact that had he lived, he would have been back on the live music front by 81.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds by what Earl Slick was saying. Plan was then to go back and finish up the album we then got later as Milk and Honey, but I don't think it was ever intended to be Milk and Honey. It would be another record. It sounds like the intention was to finish that in 82, to then hit the road again. He'd already said he'd said to the people in the studio, we're going to do a Macca. Album tour. And that's how he described it. We're going to do a Macca.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, that's how it's going to be. So, okay. So he'd have been back. Also, lest we forget, because we have a very rare piece of footage in our movie, that the night that Jimmy Carter was inaugurated, there in the audience, having not long got his green card,
Mm-hmm.
in a suit and dicky bow with the wife who's in a ball gown, is John Lennon.
Yeah.
They sent this footage over to the studio, and I go, quick question. Where have we got footage from Jimmy Carter's inauguration? They said, keep watching it. I keep watching it. And suddenly there, in the middle of this crowd of bejeweled women and very well-dressed gentlemen, mostly with cigars, is John Lennon paying his due, in hands, bowing down. The wife's there. So whether or not his political thing would have come back to the fore, I don't know. But having said that, he is a man that one administration were trying to get rid of,
Mm-hmm.
and year after getting his green card, he's a guest, an honoured guest at an inauguration. So that tells me that in some circles or other, obviously his stock's gone up a wee bit, basically as far as go. We know from people on the inside who have written books. Fred Seaman's a good example, right?
Oh yeah, Fred's great. Yeah,
Fred's book is incredible, right? Fred's book is incredible. I wanted to put Fred in the movie, but obviously,
Yeah.
we live in a world where that's now not possible.
No.
He was on when the original list was drawn up. Who shall we go to interview? He was in the top 5.
Oh, I can imagine.
And then
I could absolutely imagine.
I'd said to our then business manager, I said, I've been reading on the internet that he's not allowed to do interviews. So our business manager, we talked it over. We looked at what was on the internet. I think he even spoke to somebody legal because he had said he'd talked with somebody. And he said, you know what? I don't think we can use him because if we do, they may even come after the movie and close the film down, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Fred is probably the only person from the centre of John's universe in the whole 40 years he was with us that I've not actually met.
Mm.
And I've just found out, which is really, really good news, about 3 days ago, that Fred's coming to the New York premiere.
Oh,
So
really?
finally, we'll get to meet, and that's nice. That's good. So I'm very excited about that. But if we look at books like Fred's book and some of the other, even the Robert Rosen Nowhere Man book, for example,
Right. I've read that. Good read.
You look at the fact that John could have become slightly more political again. John certainly looked like he was going to get his face back on the cover of the newspapers again. He never shied away from anything, did he? I mean, again, we have the controversy lately where the estate, we've now just been given a brand new version of Power to the People sometime in New York City, but redacting a song. Can you imagine John Lennon redacting a song because he thought it was controversial, right?
Not at all. Not for 1 second.
When I heard that news initially, I thought, I don't know who's running the shop, but believe me, the guy that founded the shop would be very, very annoyed with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I get it. Everyone's trying to be politically correct, but you know what? Think was never really politically correct. He said what was on his mind.
Not for 2 minutes, So I think my take on it, and obviously never met the man, just been a fan of the man and read and watched things about him my whole life from being young. But what I think is, yes, I think he'd be all over Facebook, he'd be all over Twitter, he'd be all over social media.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if he had still been at Dakota or wherever he was living. It wouldn't surprise me if for a while there ended up being a yellow flag flying outside in support of, right? I think he was that kind of guy. He was the kind of guy. He couldn't not look at a serious situation and not have some kind of empathy towards it.
Right. Yeah.
And, so I think
even against the betterment of his career, like with the IRA, when that whole bit
totally
got on the radar and not in a good way.
No, I mean, there's a bit in the film where one of the guys, he'd been to some meeting apparently in London this was something I'd never heard.
Mm-hmm.
He'd been to some meeting with Michael X, in London.
Yeah.
Michael broad version, right? Michael X was hung because he murdered somebody. And John had been to a meeting with him and he'd said, "Oh, would you mind writing a check for 2,000 for the cause in Ireland?" Because John at this point in his life is marching up and down the streets, shoulder to shoulder with people like, Tariq Ali, etc., in the cause of peace. His presumption was, if I write this check, it may help peace in Northern Ireland. So he writes the check, bang. A few days later at Apple, Neil Aspinall clocks the check stub and says, "What was this for?" "Oh, it's for the cause in Northern Ireland." He went, "You want to bet your bottom dollar it's for the cause? That probably paid for Semtex." The rock star is someone tells you it's for a good cause. But more likely, given the someone in this case who's told you it wasn't for any good cause at all, it was probably for bombs and guns, and God would know.
More of the same.
But I think it's Barry Miles in the film who says what you have to understand is, once Brian had died, who literally did protect them from everything, all 4 of them.
Absolutely.
He said what did rear its head within the inner circle that we could all see very clearly as good as they'd become as musicians by 1967, they were still four pretty naive young lads from Liverpool who, the Western world was still quite a frightening place. But certainly if it wasn't explained first, Epi, right? He could
Right.
do the explaining. Look, you don't want to do that, but you do that.
Right.
Gone, right?
Stick to this. Steer
Yeah.
clear of that. Yeah, no, I get it.
Because Mac has took the reins in the studio, which seems to have worked for the last few years. But there's nobody taking the reins. And, brilliant what Neil did, brilliant what Mal did, brilliant what Derek Taylor did, all those people around
Oh,
them.
yeah.
But none of those guys ever had the name Beatles manager.
Mm-mm.
They were literally just
Handlers.
playing it till somebody else came along,
Right.
The hope is someone will come through that door eventually, right? And he'll be the guy. And it never really happened. By the time they've got rid of Klein and Apple has almost disintegrated.
Yeah.
Neil then, Neil then ends up managing it by default for the best part of 4 decades.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
And it's kind of like, it's an odd. The whole thing for a band that big, it's a very odd scenario.
Yeah. I when you put it in that perspective, absolutely. Now, Alan, you've been, for all intents and purposes, really studying the subject, and whether it's the Clash or the Jam or Status Quo or even Monty Python or and beyond. What does a band's story cross over from a music documentary to, say, like social history?
I think you've got to. I can only speak for me in this because there's a lot of people making documentaries,
Right.
and a lot of people would look at it from different. I mean, I prior to doing them on my own, I was doing work with Don Letts and Martin Baker, and Don is an absolute god at this. The man's amazing.
Right. Yeah.
But the way Don does it is not the way I do it by any stretch of the imagination. Yes, I saw Don doing it, and it was aware of how he did it. But I think what I've always tried to do, although I'm fully aware that I'm making one entity, whether it be a film about Monty Python, Sid Vicious, or Status Quo,
Yeah.
it's one entity to the best of my ability for two audiences. Because what I try to do is give the diehard fans something that's worth coming out to.
Mm-hmm.
But also, whilst still trying to keep your hand on the oars to the degree that I have this fictional couple that I'm sure my team are sick to death of listening about. And I go, we've got to make sure that when Tom and Barbara are watching it with their fish and chips on their knee on a Friday night, 2 years after it comes out on some small channel, they still get the thing we're talking about from start to finish.
Mm.
So we can't make it for the fans to the point that we lose Tom and Barbara.
Right.
They've got with us on the whole journey, So it's
That's
really
a good way of looking at it.
I remember one time I was sat in Twickenham Studios and I was working with a lovely editor, who's a lady called Cerise, and who'd worked on Doctor Who. And we were working on a project, and she came in one morning and we're chatting away, and I said, right, we do this with that bit, and that moves over there, and then we put that bit of archive there, and they'll go straight into animation and blah, blah. And she looked at me and she said, do you think Tom and Barbara's going to get that? Well, I hope they will. I do hope they will.
It's full circle, right?
Again, it's that thing of, what does annoy me occasionally is I buy a documentary on DVD or Blu-ray that someone's been raving about.
Yeah.
And I watch it and I go, okay, great story, but every single piece of archive in that movie I've seen 8,000 times.
Yeah.
I probably own 200 times on things. Why that laziness if you have a budget? Why that, when we do movies, Quo's a good, quick, easy example.
Right.
Someone comes in, oh yeah, we got Rockin' All Over the World, Top of the Pops. I went, good for you. What do you mean? Well, every time I've seen a Quo documentary, they play Rockin' All Over the World on Top of the Pops.
Yeah.
Not in,
It's the go-to.
I know there's a promo video that's hilarious because there's a puppet of Alan Lancaster. He was in Australia. And I
Yeah.
also, that in Germany at the time, they had a sort of German equivalent to Top of the Pops called Disco 45. And
Yeah,
they
yeah, I remember that.
did it on there. And I've never seen it. So
Oh,
let's go to Germany. Let's get that, not go physically, of course, but get that clip from Germany. Let's get this promo video with the puppet of Alan and amalgamate them around the story of this great song. Because
there you go.
that way, your diehard fans, wow. And
Mm-hmm.
Tom and Barbara go, oh, this is a story about a song we're aware of. They don't even know that that's rare footage. They just go, that's a
Oh
good
yeah,
song.
I know that song. Yeah. So you're basically you're taking care of the both audiences, the diehard and the
There's,
casual
there's always a
fan.
case you can't because there's nothing more to. I mean, the biggest dilemma, I suppose, that you have, whether it's Sid Vicious, Graham Chapman,
Mm-hmm.
George Harrison, John Lennon, anyone who's no longer with us, when you do an interview, you know yourself, you can almost get someone to say what you want them to say by asking the right question, right?
Right, right.
When someone's no longer here
Yeah.
and you get into edit and you go, okay, so what we really need right now, come out of what that guy just said there, we need John Lennon to say, for example, didn't really know me dad. You know, I only met him vaguely, and then he turned up again when I was 22 and a rock star. So everyone goes out, the research go, oh yeah, we don't really, we'll try and find that. But ultimately, after time, come back and go, sorry, didn't really didn't really say it quite as succinctly. There's interviews here and there where he touches on bits, but not right how you said it. We had a
Yeah.
really, we had a quite a funny experience on Borrowed Time on the edit.
Mm-hmm.
One morning, this Jesus Christ apology from one of the press conferences arrived,
Right.
right? Well,
Yeah.
I'd watched every Jesus Christ apology known to man when we'd done the Pepper film a few years earlier.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
said, look, I don't need to see all the Jesus Christ apologies. Just send one over. Anyone will do. It's
Right.
not a big part of the Borrowed Time story. I'll just pick one and we'll go. Anyway, it arrives and it goes up on the Avid and it's quite long. This is about 15, 16 minutes. I said, well, I know that the Jesus Christ apology sure as heck isn't 15 minutes. It's about 2 minutes top wipe. And he
Yeah.
says it sheepishly, you know. So let's run it. Let's run the press conference. And we start running the press conference. And we get towards the end of the press conference. And one of the journalists asks the question, what about your father? And out of nowhere, because I'd never watched this press conference all the way through, out of
Mm-hmm.
nowhere, John says, well, I never really knew my father. He was around when I was a kid. And he almost said what I'd said the day before. And I look and I go, right,
Oh,
let's just not worry about Jesus Christ for a minute now. Let's park him over there. We need that.
yeah. That's the
To,
story.
that's because that's going to come in handy later on in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
John, nothing better than the person. There was a great story on Python where I think we had, the way we'd done the deal with them, we had 2 full days with each living, breathing Python. So we had 2 days of Terry Gilliam, 2 Mike Palin, two
Right.
John Cleese, Terry Jones. But of course, we didn't have 2 days with Graham Chapman because when we started shooting, he'd been dead 20 years.
Right.
When we get into edit, and the Pythons, the way they run things, are very, very fair. And there are six, that there's that famous quote, I think it was Derek Taylor said the Beatles were a four-headed hybrid, right? Well, the Pythons are a six-headed hybrid, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Then he's done equally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Mike Palin rang one morning in the studio, and he said, listen, he said, I don't want to worry you. He said, but we're all a bit concerned that Gray won't get the same voice in this movie that we get. And we want him to have that voice because he was very much an integral part,
Yeah.
After
Yeah.
Brian we're talking about, right? This is Brian made flesh.
Right.
So when we knew this, we had a team of researchers working on Python because the size of the project. We go out and we do 70 odd interviews, the most we've ever done.
Mhm.
We get back And I'd said to the girls in this sort of pool doing all the research, about 3 or 4 of them, I said, how do you go on with Graham Chapman? I said, because I've got about 9 hours of each Python talking, or on follow rounds, what they're doing now, where are they now, blah, blah. And they said, oh, 9 hours? I said, yeah. They said, we've got about 21 hours of Graham talking. In the last 2 years of Graham's life, when he knew he had the big C,
Right.
he'd stopped doing comedy and he started being a guest on all the big British chat shows.
Oh.
And he literally would go on anything and talk about his entire life and career all day long. So
okay.
there was Parkinson, Russell Harty, Pebble Mill at one.
Yeah.
He did the smorgasbord, everything.
Yeah.
So,
He did the whole routine. Yeah.
and
The
Eric,
whole schedule
that
of it.
day, Eric Idle rang the office and I said, Eric? He said, yeah. I said, you know, everyone was worried about Graham not getting the same amount of screen time as the rest. He said, yeah. I said, we've got nearly 3 times more of Graham than we have of you.
Oh, that's too funny. That's too funny.
And it was just so funny because it worked.
Yeah.
When we context, it was like, and there's Graham.
It's like it was meant to be.
Yeah. And
It
so,
really does. It fell into place.
yeah, with the Pepper film and with the Lennon film, you know, we go into Pepper with no George, no John, no Brian.
Right. Right.
Not that we didn't have access to Paul and Ringo anyway, because it's an unofficial movie, but at least we knew we could still get interviews of them that were done last week, right? We had none of them 3. We go into John with no John. But I think the way we've come out of it,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like you'd never know, because almost everything I needed John Lennon to say on screen, John Lennon's on screen saying from some times
Right.
back, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think once the other thing that does give you a bit of artistic freedom is that once someone is no longer with us, I don't think the general public necessarily expect as much of what you're bringing to the table. So you can almost have John at the very end of the film after talking from 1968 if what he says is completely poignant to where you're going on the journey, you know. It's nice to see that. So
It was on his mind, and they can
yeah,
hear it right from the horse's mouth.
and I'd rather, you know, much rather he said it than
Yeah. Yeah.
doing.
Now, you've handled so many different bands, telling the stories and stuff. Let's go like let's say with punk. Okay. In many ways, punk was an anti-establishment statement, you know. But now punk is nostalgia. Is that and is part of the establishment? How do you navigate irony in your work?
My father used to have this great saying when we were kids, and he said to us, you know, sometimes people, if a piece of clothing they have is not particularly at that moment in time fashionable, they just throw it in the bin or they get rid of it. They go, no, don't need that.
Right.
What I do, he said, I just push them to the back of the wardrobe, because give it 10 years. And they'll be in the back again. Right?
Right?
Oh, you mean
Yeah.
the jacket like a decade ago? Well, everyone's wearing them now. We'll be fine. I think while we've got the stage now, certainly in my opinion, in rock and roll,
Mm-hmm.
whereby you can't really reinvent the wheel. You can only keep rediscovering the wheel. So, you know, arguably no Chuck Berry, no Metallica, but it's a hell of a long way there.
Right.
Hell of it goes on a road like this.
Yeah.
Arguably no Little Richard, no Motorhead, but it's a hell of a long way, right? And you, with the Beatles especially, you've got this scenario whereby I was just reading a review this morning for the new re-release of the anthology.
Oh yeah.
And it was by someone I know, a guy called Darryl Easley, a lovely guy, journalist.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a review, and it's a very fair point. When the original, lest we forget, when the original anthology came out, the Beatles stock was about as low as it could be. right? They'd
Mhm.
almost vanished under a rock somewhere. Then this appeared in the press. Oh, there's going to be this big documentary, 8 hours long. There's going to be albums of unreleased material, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Within 6 months, they've got the number one album in nearly every country in the world with at least one of those records. They've
Right.
got the number one single in nearly every country in the world with at least one of those singles.
Mhm.
This TV documentary is being watched by as many people in different countries as watch the Ed Sullivan show in America night one. It's like when you go to work or school or whatever the next morning, people are discussing this documentary
Right.
about a band that technically at that point in time hasn't existed for 30 plus years, right?
Right.
Since then, we've arguably had the rebirth of the Beatles in our lifetime also. So, whereas Sgt. Pepper used to be one CD, it's now 7 CDs.
Yeah.
Whereas Revolver used to be one CD, it's now 6 CDs. And it just
Right.
grows and grows, right? There's another anthology volume this year, more outtakes, right?
Yeah.
We're told if the Jungle Drums are believed to be true, then the Rubber Soul box set has been mixed, done, finished, and ready for about 3 years by now. But, it must be round the corner somewhere. We've
Right.
had the Ron Howard film, we've had Beatles 64, we've had Peter Jackson's project.
Yeah.
So who would have believed, really, when this band ended in 1969, 70, depending who you vote for,
Mhm.
and then by 73, literally had to be revisited with 2 greatest hits albums because half the Western world had forgotten who they were. They'd kind of gone like that, disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then disappeared again, realistically. Doesn't mean that Paul and John and George and Ringo weren't working on things and weren't in the public eye. But by the time some people say punk rock, but I would even argue glam rock came along,
Yeah.
the Beatles stock was worthless. Apple had been dissolved. Lennon had retired from recording. Harrison was supposed to be still recording, but had gone missing in his garden somewhere.
Right.
Paul was really the flag flyer, and Ringo, as we now know, had a drink problem.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then along comes this thing, the anthology, and totally reinvents it. And I think, could you imagine in 1976? Even as again, to use an old family saying, even for all the tea in China,
Yeah.
that this outrageous anarchic band called the Sex Pistols, who sang about anarchy in the UK and being pretty vacant and whatever else, could you imagine that in 2025, with a new lead singer, they would be one of the most successful bands gigging in sheds and stadiums out there? Because I think if you'd have tried to tell somebody, they'd have taken you away to the funny room.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
They'd have-
No, you're right on that.
These guys are going to be they're going to be either 70 or nearly 70 by then. Are you telling me they're still going to be screaming anarchy in the UK? Well, maybe not then. But I think the reality, and I don't think anybody, I can understand, should I say, when anybody doesn't want to hear this. But with the exception of things that do blow up in different countries, right?
Right.
Moment in time, I would say, if I was putting my money on a horse, that horse would be Youngblood. Because 5 years ago, no one knew who he was, and now, you turn on social media and he's everywhere, right?
Right. Right.
But the way I look at it is, we've had to keep on regenerating the older stuff because coming along to replace. Where's the new John Lennon?
There is none.
Where's the new
Where's the
Keith?
new Beatles?
Where's the new Rolling Stones? Where's the new, even again, to show you how far forward you can bring it, where's the new Duran Duran?
Right.
Where's the
Yeah.
new U2? Right?
Right.
Everything that we've had that's been that big in our lifetimes. I put this thing on Facebook yesterday, and it got quite a nice narrative going. And it's just a picture of the 4 members of Kiss.
Mhm.
And it says, and it's something someone's, done art-wise, and it says across the top, I know I'm old, but there's nothing like this will ever enter your lifetime.
Yeah.
And then instantly I'm getting private messages of lots of Kiss fans like, oh man, can I steal that? Yeah, of course you can. No problem. But I think, when you you bought, say, Kiss Alive 2 and you went home and you opened up the gatefold. And
Yeah.
depending on what age you were, and I would say that could be anywhere between about 8 and 22, all you did was,
Yeah.
one day I might get a chance to see that, and that's going to change my life. Now, again, arguably the same with, here in England, right now,
Right.
there's a new band blowing up in London, especially, called the Molotovs. Brother and sister. I think one's 17 and one's 16, or one's 19 and one's 16, right?
Right.
These kids were playing in the cellar of the pub I go into a year and a half ago. 2 days ago, they played one of the biggest clubs in Camden, which is about 1,500, ram solid. They've been out on the road this year with the Pistols. They've been out on the road with Blondie. They've been out on the road with big festivals, supporting Iggy Pop. They've got the support slot in the UK for Youngblood next year, right?
Right.
These have gone from nothing to everything, right?
Right.
And they're almost a carbon copy of the Jam. They've got the English thing, they've got the suits, they've got the attitude, but of course, the 90% of the audience they're playing to, 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, wouldn't know the Jam if they walked in this room.
That's a good point. Yeah, you're right.
So it's not, and I don't, by saying that, I'm not sort of saying they're ripping anybody off. No, they're not ripping anybody off.
No.
But
I think it's attitude.
What it's doing is it's proving that wheel is still turning. It's proving it's moving forward.
It's a lifestyle.
It's nice when you go, occasionally, because there's a lot of live bands do play in small rooms, in pubs in London. And you'll go, mates of mine will go, oh, have you seen blah, blah? I should go and see them. And you go, and there's all these young kids, 16, 17, leaping about at the front, and they're having the time of their lives. And there's those old duffers at the back stood there, and one of the lads will say, what do you think? I'll go, yeah, well, they're all right, but clearly nobody in this room knows who the Buzzcocks are, clearly. But they're all right.
Yeah, it's all been done before, folks.
It is a thing where it's very, very difficult. I mean, what was it John Lennon himself once said? There's only so many chords.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So you can't reinvent the wheel completely. You can, as I've said on most of the press campaign for Borrowed Time, we're not here to reinvent the wheel, but we can put bits on the wheel a bit. We can trim it a wee bit. But I think if you're looking for something brand new in the 21st century in rock and roll, my advice to you would be don't hold your breath, because you're going to go blue before we find something brand new.
Well, that was going to be my next question was, do you believe modern bands still carry the same cultural weight as the artists of the 60s and 70s? And has the medium kind of changed the message?
I think it is the medium.
I do too.
I mean, I'm 60 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was 14, 15, 16, apart from tiny bits of things that fluttered around on the radio and TV, you had to wait till Wednesday to find out the real news, because that's when Sounds and NME came out.
Right.
Wednesday morning, you'd be on your way to school, you'd get Sounds or NME, and you'd get the story, somebody's going on tour, or someone's got a new album out, or whatever it might be.
Tickets go on sale, yeah.
Michael, there's a good friend of mine who used to be the musical editor of the News of the World newspaper in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And we were discussing this one night a number of years ago. The world's first internet death was Michael Jackson, because Michael Jackson's death was announced in such a way by social media and in such a way by all the different platforms and channels that by time the following morning came, and normally people that were interested would go out and buy a newspaper to find out the news, those newspapers on the stands were already chip wrappers.
Yeah, they were outdated.
Everything you needed to know about Jackson's death, you knew before you went to bed that night. It was all, I remember sitting there, because the girl I was dating at the time was a big Michael Jackson fan, and we're at my flat, and one of her friends texted her and said, I think Michael Jackson's dead. So she went on to whatever it was, MySpace or some, normally you Google something and you might put Monty Python into a Google bar.
Right.
And And I will guarantee, no matter how many times you go back to the first page, it will never change, right?
Right. Right.
Because it'll be their official website, the Wikipedia page, their unofficial website, the best one there is. Those things have that many followers, they stay in linear order.
Oh yeah.
On the night that Michael Jackson died, we're sat in my flat and we put in the Google bar, Michael Jackson dead. And the first page of Google for Michael Jackson was changing like the arrivals board at JFK.
Really?
Top story, no good.
Hmm.
New top story, bang, top story. And as I said, by the time you went to bed, you knew everything there was to know.
Yeah.
So I think now, if you're, to answer your question, if you're a band in the modern age, Youngblood's become skilled in the art, especially, but all the older bands are doing it as well.
Yeah.
If let's say Kiss or Metallica or U2 or even Macca
Mm-hmm.
want to tell you today, now, this minute, that they've got a new album coming out on December 1st, they don't need to wait for a specific date or time. They just get their guy in the office and say, okay, so in England now, it's just gone 4:00. Bang. And it goes Facebook, Instagram, X, gone.
Yeah.
And by 6:00, everybody in a McCartney or U2 or Metallica t-shirt on the planet that's interested already knows.
Yeah.
And those tours that we used to have to wait every Wednesday to find out about, this seems to be a band announcing a world tour for 2026 about every 20 minutes at the moment on the internet, right?
Right. Right.
On San Diego, Metallica, you know, Def Leppard, there's ticket after ticket after ticket.
Right.
Some of these shows are 16, 18, 20 months away, but they're on, right? And I think it's just the nature of the world we now live in. You see, again, this is very much an age thing.
Yeah.
But I was on the tube the other day, going into town, and the schools are currently on holiday here. It's half term, and about 60%, maybe 70% of the people on the tube are of a certain age, and about 60%, maybe 70% of the people on the tube have literally got a mobile phone and they're like that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything could be going on, but they don't know. They're locked completely into that mobile phone screen.
That's it. Yeah.
And it's just the way the world is right now.
The medium has changed, and you don't have to wait. It's almost like instant gratification.
I love there's a couple of really old pubs in central London in Soho, and one of them on a Saturday has a chalkboard outside, and on the chalkboard, pretty much every Saturday it says, we don't have Wi-Fi in this pub. Why don't you come inside and pretend it's 1973?
Talk to another human.
And
Love
talk
it.
Have a look at a newspaper, read a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, wow, I don't think it'll catch on at all.
Sadly. I'm old school. I love talking to people. I just do.
We're in that world now where everything is instantly accessible.
Oh, yeah.
Again, take it to its absolute extreme. The way I figure it in my head is, even going back 8, 9, 10 years ago, it gets to about 5 or 6 o'clock, you feel hungry. What am I going to cook? Or who am I going to ring to deliver something?
Right.
Why, if I'm tired, why do I want to make a pizza? There's a guy down the road who'll make a pizza, and there's another guy who'll bring it here. Knock on the door and go, there's your pizza.
Yeah.
Now, maybe pizza's a bad analogy. They were delivering them years ago. But you can have anything delivered now to your door. You can have a salad delivered.
Yeah, a candy bar if you wanted.
And so that's the world we tend to live in, this world that is. But again, going back to something that we talked about earlier, I think I really do believe John Lennon would have warmed to all that, because I think he was that kind of instant person.
Yeah, I agree.
There's so many people in either the Pepper film or Lennon film who knew him, were on screen going, John would get really excited about something and then carry it around the world with him for about 3 months. Then he'd get bored with it, walk away. Paul gets excited about something. He's still banging the drum for it 20 years later.
Now, Alan, your films.
Yeah.
You often fuse performances, journalism, psychology. And when you sit down to edit all of this, what's the emotional arc you're searching for?
I think letting stories breathe. I'm a big believer, and I've done on every film we've done. If we start off with a story told just by talking heads, right?
Mm-hmm.
That story by talking heads. The Talking Heads version of Status Quo, Hello Quo was about 7 hours long.
Mm.
Walked away from the studio and lived with it for a week or two. Then sat down in front of it one day prior to going back in the studio and went, right, that thing I thought was funny there 3 weeks ago, it's not that funny compared to the film. That thing I thought was really important over there, it's not really that important compared to other important stuff in the film. So we
Right.
can lose that. And again, this is something the crew must be sick of hearing, but I've said this for years, is we start off and we get this thing and we let it eat as much as it wants. And then we put it on a diet. Then we have archives, so we kind of fatten it up again. And then we put on a diet. And then we have the animation. And then we put on a diet.
On a diet.
Then we go, now it's time to see how all this works together.
Oh my.
No, there could be stories or scenes, if you like,
Mm-hmm.
that live right the way through the whole period. And then we get to the actual nitty gritty of the final cut and we go, don't like that. Now, occasionally, some of those don't like that will just go straight to the DVD extras bin.
Yeah.
But I've known don't like that's that we've worked 3 months on that have gone straight on the cutting room floor. That nobody needs that. It's done.
Yeah.
And I just think some people, I know other directors and producers who'd say it's a long-winded way of doing things, and it might be, but for me, it's easy. For me, it's the easy way to do things, because if you've lived with it long enough,
Mm-hmm.
you need to be, to me, to have known you've done a thorough job on it. When you get to the premiere, you need to be the only person in that cinema that doesn't want to see that film because you know it back with Chinese.
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it.
I've
Yeah.
been for now where it's literally the curtains have I've gone up, done an intro, curtains have opened, I've gone back, joined some friends in the seats, and then gone, do you know what? There's a restaurant around the corner for me, and my Q&A's in 2 hours. I'm going to go and go and get come back, maybe join my friends again, and go. And would you please welcome to stage Alan G. Parker for the Q&A? Yes, sir. Did you love the film? Really great. Yeah. Like, obviously, I'm not going to say. By the way, the linguine was marvelous as well. But I just like.
I love it. I love it. Now, Alan, as someone who's, we've talked about this before, you've worked with music, you've
Yeah.
worked with comedy, you've worked with culture. What unique storytelling challenges in humanizing icons versus them?
I think again, it's knowing what it's as much knowing what to not do as to do. There's been occasions over the years where, oh, you did Monty Python. Some guys over here would like you to do blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
Not really interested because it's got to set off. It's not quite as simple as if I'm not into it, I don't want to do it.
Right.
I mean, I've talked for quite some time over the years to bands that I don't own a single record by, who I've gone, if they do turn around and offer me what I think they're going to offer me, I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
But on the other hand, I know what I'm like. So if I did say yes to something like that, I'd no doubt go out and within the first couple of weeks of shooting, probably albums, a decent greatest hits, a couple of other documentaries and 2 books, just to get into the space. But predominantly, it's been a lot about knowing what to. I mean, up until we did Sergeant Pepper, we'd never done anything that wasn't an official documentary.
Right.
We kind of jumped off the official horse to do Sergeant Pepper purely because I'd always had this thing in me where I wanted to do a Beatles film. And I didn't think that I was big enough a name to wait for the call from Apple. They're
Mm.
Peter Jackson's and Ron Howard's.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I just need to do my own thing, get it out of my system, it's done. At that point in time, there was no thought that would have crossed my mind that went from Beatles to John Lennon, because that's almost like revisiting the same place.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of conversations with a lot of people close to me in the middle that loved the Pepper film, and which did very, very good business around the world and got some incredible reviews. They loved it, and they sort of said, you're saying you wanted to scratch this itch. The itch is also Lennon as well, isn't it? You're not going to really get off that horse until you've. And what it was, I did an awful lot of Q&As around Europe for Pepper.
Yeah.
And at the end of the Q&As, a lot of the people in the audience would say to me, "So what's your next Beatles project?" Almost like that I would go, "Okay, we've done this one, we'll go and do another one."
I see.
And it wasn't set in stone. I mean, we had been talking to a couple of rather large metal bands. We'd been talking to a couple of singers. But then suddenly, because of the size of the impact of the Pepper film on the media, certainly our business manager had said to me at the time, there's that famous saying, lightning never strikes anywhere twice. He said, well, it could in this instance, because you just went and did the 50th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper. And by the time, because we released in different times in different countries, by the time the press campaign was really finished, it was late. We released here in May 2017 for the Pepper 50th anniversary,
Right.
but we didn't release in, say, Australia until February 2018.
Oh, okay.
By the time the press campaign was finished, which was like March, April 2018, we're 2 years away from the 40th anniversary of John Lennon's death. And everybody around me is kind of going, well, maybe lightning does strike. So if we can have as big a result from the 50th anniversary, can you imagine how big a John Lennon documentary would be that opened on December 8th, 1980? Now, 2020. Now, the irony of that whole thing is, because it's ended up coming out again piecemeal, different times in different places,
Right.
we are premiere in New York for US Canada on the 8th of December, and it's 45 years to the day.
Wow.
So we planned for the 40th and we got the 45th. But there's never been a film in my life or a book or a project of any kind that's taken this long. But a lot of why this long, partly Brexit to blame. That made investors very nervous.
Mm-hmm.
Part COVID's to blame. That has us sat on our hands twice for long periods of time, one of them being over a year.
Right.
Partly, by the time we did get up and running in May 21, the world it looks now that the world was wide open by then. The world wasn't wide open. You go to New York, come home, and normally the way we work would be we come home, we have maybe 2 days off to shower and repack a bag, and then we go to, say, Venice where there's an interview. What happened in 21 is you came home and one of the team rang Venice and said, yeah, we're coming your way for 5 days, got some work to do. Oh, where have you just come from? New York. You need to quarantine for 5 weeks.
Oh, my goodness.
No one wanted you if you'd been somewhere else.
Right. No, you're right. Everyone was scared.
I think it was one of the investors who said this to me about halfway through the filming year, which turned out to be 21.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the 2 steps forward, 5 steps back dance.
Yeah.
And it was like progress, none. Progress. Yep. It was like, but, we're lucky, we got 60 odd interviewees in the bag.
Yeah.
The edit became a long thing because we had so much to choose from.
Right.
It's been a hell of a long journey, and it's kind of it's going to be cool to start something new. But on the other hand, realize we still got, we just opened in Japan, we're opening in America in December.
Yeah.
We don't open in India till end. So
Wow.
there's still a long way to go, but we can still be doing other things, which is nice.
Now, Alan, you've collaborated with everyone from Stan Lee to Monty Python to Kiss.
Yes.
What's the common thread that connects all these worlds of superheroes, satire, and rock stars? What's the common thread?
Well, for me, it all started with comic books. Because Dad was a music fan, we were getting bought singles, and we amalgamate. Me and my brother were amalgamating collections at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, which is quite rock and roll. But it all begins with Spider-Man,
Yeah.
Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, and then this one superhero that nobody else at school seemed to have comics by, and I'd got into because there'd been a comic for sale in one of the newsagents in Blackburn, an American import, which I bought and read and loved. But what really got me into it, to the point of ending up buying every issue they ever printed and all the specials and this, that, and the other, is the strap line on the comic was "Trapped in a World He Never Made," and as a bully, I could resonate to it, and that was Howard the Duck.
I
The
see.
Duck to me is kind of although Spidey and Hulk and everything else is very important, especially Spider-Man.
Right.
Voted Spider-Man fan, knew the story backwards. But when the Duck came along, everything changed, because if you look at the backstory, what a fantastic idea. This duck is beamed down from a planet where ducks are the intelligent species. He's clever enough to be a detective on planet Earth, and the only reason he's still on planet Earth is he doesn't know how to get home. Sorry, we've gone to low battery again. So
Gotcha.
maybe somewhere between this one and the last one, you can amalgamate something cool.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's wrap it up. I'll ask you just some crazy questions here. Like, if you could go back and film one moment in rock and roll history that no camera ever caught, what would it be, Alan?
Probably Beatles' Candlestick Park.
That would be a good one. Yeah. And what's one question you wish people would ask you but never do?
I don't think there is one. I think years, because I've got quite a reputation for being able to talk the legs off a standing cat. Most of the people radio or podcasts are good talkers, so I think we've covered.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know there's anything I've ever not been asked. Occasionally people will want to, you what you will get is if you do a fan one, I've done quite a lot of fan podcasts.
Yeah.
And if you do a status quo fan, that's a good example. Status quo fan podcast, oh, what didn't we see? Oh, what did we get? Well, not think you got enough. You got the whole story. You got the band back together for the first time in 27 years. You got enough. Believe me, that was you got.
Well, we're all like Oliver and the Artful Dodger. Can I have some more, please? Now, as the lights fade and the reels run out, Alan, your films leave you with more than nostalgia. They leave you with a sense of unfinished conversations. Your work isn't just about preserving history. It's about provoking memory. Each frame feels like a search for truth in the static, I guess, and for the heartbeat that still echoes behind the myths we thought we understood. Now, Parker, Alan, you don't chase perfection or polish. You chase people. Their contradictions, their humor, their brilliance, their flaws, from Lennon's late night introspection to chaos of punk's rock and roll. When it's all said and done, Alan, what do you hope to achieve? Not just a project per se, but in career-wise, what are you hoping to make the statement?
At this stage, just carry on doing what we do, because I enjoy it. I really enjoy it, and I like the challenge. I like looking at things and thinking, okay, if you got offered that, could you make a fist of it? probably, you know, there's always a way.
Mhm.
And then just try and put something out there that maybe is coming from an angle that somebody else wouldn't look at, therefore they can't do it.
Okay. So you look at it as a challenge where some people might look at it as an obstruction.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, Alan, I really want to thank you for your time, and it's been great talking to you. I feel like we're close mates, really, you know. And
Thank
one of my favorite Spider-Man villains is the Hobgoblin in the very
Brilliant.
beginning.
Yeah,
Yes, yes. So, with that being said, let's stay in touch, you and I, because I got a feeling you and I are going to be doing some great things together in the future.
okay,
And
well, listen to your time, and I've enjoyed doing it.
all right, well, tell you what, for Beatles-Rama Radio and TV, you have just heard unedited, unheld back, nothing held back, Alan G. Parker. And Alan, I'm looking forward to your next project, whatever it may be. I'm sure it's going to be amazing because you are cut from that amazing cloth. So keep up the great work. And if I could ever be of service, please sound off.
Thank you so much. Thanks, man.
There you go.
On.
The most famous person in the world who was then assassinated.
And a man comes running and yelling, "We've got a gunshot in the chest." Can you believe it? John Lennon.
Don't be afraid. This is only the beginning. This 60s was just waking up in the morning, you know. I just can't wait. I'm so glad to be around.